Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Spinner. I'm excited this week to be talking with Mark Stevens. He's got a new book, and he's also going to be in the Farmington area soon as well, and we're going to talk a little bit about both. We kind of just recently connected over the past summer at the Mesa Verde Writers Conference, and then I was able to finally have you on the show. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks a million. I appreciate you having me today. So I live up in Mancos, Colorado, between Cortez and Durango. I write mostly mysteries and thrillers. I do have one non-crime fiction novel out in the world called The Fireballer, based on a story that's set in the world of professional baseball. But currently, the series I'm working on is a series set in Denver, and it features a television reporter in the first book. Well, she's going to be the main character in the series. In the first book, she's tangling with a retired and hiding in plain sight serial killer. It's much more of a thriller, I would say, than the earlier series I wrote, which was more of a traditional kind of amateur sleuth mystery series. But I love crime fiction, and I love reading crime fiction, and enjoy writing it too.
Love a good mystery, and I really had fun reading yours. Not only was it a familiar setting, but there's a lot of intensity and a lot of interest as far as like her day job and just everything that she's dealing with. For me, I've worked in journalism, so that part of it was fun. But I think right now, just media in general is kind of a weird machine that is all over the place, and that just added another layer of interest.
Right. In journalism, both in print and in television news production, and things have really changed since I left the business. There's no question about it, particularly the way in which the media is getting attacked right and left, and just the basic sort of decency and assumption of what the reporter's job is and how they go about it. And it's just the whole environment has changed a lot. So I think I tried to capture that a little bit in the first book. There's a little bit more of that in the second book, which comes out April 7th. The first book is called No Lie Lasts Forever, and the second book coming out in April is called Two Truths and a Lie. The whole landscape of what you're talking about is just, it used to be that you'd go out and there used to be a basic civic kind of pride in being a reporter. And yes, you'd run into people you were covering who were not happy that you were there. And there were people who would make it difficult for you to do your job. And that was probably when you knew you were onto a good story, is when they were trying to make you go away. In the end, there was always sort of a basic agreement that if you put something in the paper, that the consequences and accountability for that, there'd be other people who would follow through on that, whether it was a government agency, and if there was a scandal in one department, then the mayor would have to deal with that, and there would be some sort of follow-up. And now it's the whole news industry has shrunk. The way they're treated is very challenging. Everything's shifted, and I hope it comes back, but I'm worried.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and it's interesting because one of my favorite classes that I also thought was one of the most interesting classes when I was working on my bachelor's was media law and ethics. And it went through a lot of historical cases, and it just really made you think about like the purpose of journalism and how it has the power to influence people, and where do you make those judgment calls at different times. And it was really interesting to go through the case studies. And that's kind of been on my mind lately, because I'm just like, where did some of that go? It's a little, it's kind of disappeared in certain areas, at least, of journalism and media in general. Yeah, I'm hoping as well that at some point we kind of start swinging back toward the underlying purpose and goals of journalism. Right. So we'll see. There's that hope.
Yes.
Well, and as you said, your background, you understand the industry, but it has been changing, and you reflect that in the books. As far as research and kind of like seeing where things stand at this point compared to when you left the industry, what was your approach for that? Were you able to call on friends who are still in the industry and ask questions, or maybe go in if you still had some context and just kind of see what the process is like and observe? I was curious on how you updated yourself in that area of the book.
Right. Well, just in terms of the process of journalism itself, after I left being a reporter and a TV news producer, I actually switched over to being director of communications for the Denver Public Schools. for 11 years. And then I was at the State Department of Education, and I was also up in the Greeley School District. So I was working with reporters all the time, and I could see that end of the process. And even after I started my own PR firm, I was still working with reporters constantly. So I still knew what reporters, how they go about their business. But the big difference was television news gathering, because the technology has changed so much. Even it changes every year. It's a very fast moving business in terms of the equipment and the digitalization and the ability to remotely, there are apps now on a phone where you can go live on television. If you just have your phone with you and you have the right app and the right signal strength, you can go live on TV. And that, believe me, that wasn't there 10 years ago. So I contacted a friend at Channel 4 in Denver, a TV reporter named Kelly Worthman. She's been around for a while and has been a weekend anchor. More recently, she's been given a new anchor shift, I think, during the weekdays. But she's somebody who I spent a day with, just sort of traipsing around and watching the technology and taking notes when I was working on No Lie Lasts Forever. And that goes back a few years now, and it's still changing. So she's somebody who I've not only been able to lob in questions by email, I'll just zap her an email and maybe a day later I'll get an answer. She's also somebody who's offered to read my manuscripts and make suggestions. So both No Lie and the new book, Two Truths and a Lie, went through her computer for her input, for her catching little mistakes and little suggestions, just little terminology, things that would, maybe the average reader would not, second guess something. They just go right through it and assume that's correct. But as a TV person, she would, say, this is how we refer to that. And I can't really think of an example right off the top of my head, but it was that kind of veracity I was looking for, and that kind of detail that gives it the kind of solid building block you're looking for as a writer.
Well, and I find it interesting because, there's always been the advice, like, write what you know, but we know that's not completely realistic. You can't only write what you know. Sometimes you do have to research and learn. And with you, even, it is something you're familiar with, but you've been getting back into the realm of it so you can write it in a current mindset.
Yeah.
That can be really intimidating for a lot of writers to not know how to research something and reach out to people who can give that advice about the vocabulary and the technology and how something would realistically play out. Because those are things that really stick out to readers when they're not quite right. And it can really affect a reader experience. And so I was wondering if you had advice for other writers on approaching that and what kind of things to look out for and how to handle that so they don't make those mistakes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I recognize and I understand the tentative feeling you might get. If I want to write about a firefighter, how do I get those details? If I call a firefighter and ask him for an interview, or ask for a ride along, or if I want to shadow a cop or a private detective or anybody, a chef, a nurse, anybody, will they let me do that? And I would say get over the tentativeness and get out there and ask. And if you get a no, ask the next person. You will find somebody who not only loves reading, say, detective novels or mysteries or police procedurals or whatever they might be, they would love to help an author get it right because they've seen mistakes in books about their profession, and they want to make sure that the next book that comes out is better. And they relish that opportunity. So keep asking and keep sort of knocking on doors, or even just asking your community, who do you know who might have this job and could answer a few questions. If you buy them coffee or lunch as starters and come prepared with 20 great questions that you need to know, and then turn it into a request for a job shadow or something, you'd be surprised, I think, at the number of people who'd be willing to help. The other thing I would say is the magic of YouTube these days. There's just nothing that's not on there about the smallest little detail. It's just an amazing resource, and make sure you're paying attention to the date something was recorded. But, you can cross-check a lot of details there and see people in action doing their jobs. I wouldn't say it's the last resource or anything. I wouldn't necessarily take everything to the bank that you find on YouTube, but it's certainly a decent starting place to check on things. And then I just quickly go back to your opening bit there at the beginning of the question about writing what you know. And I would say one of the joys of fiction writing is an opportunity to write about what you don't know. And to pick an area that you might be interested in, or a setting or a character or a job profession, and that gives you a chance to learn about that. My first 5 books in my mystery series about a female hunting guide were, first of all, I'm not a hunter. I'm not somebody who wouldn't necessarily enjoy that. But I met a woman up there in the Flat Tops Wilderness who inspired the character, and I knew I had to do a lot of research to get the character right. I think I did. And it was a real thrill to try to pull that together and try to go figure out what questions I needed answered and go find a way to get them answered, and read different kinds of magazines that I was used to, watching videos online, and then putting myself out there on the trail with groups of hunters and going to do that research. Even though I wasn't there to hunt, I was there to take notes and soak in the atmosphere. And what better day was there than that, trying to make sure I absorbed everything. So it was a years-long process. Every book, there are 5 books, gave me an opportunity to research new questions, and it was a fun journey. So I would encourage writers who hear the write what you know line to kind of put that aside or not be intimidated by that. I certainly was at first and thought, my gosh, what do I know? And how am I going to write about that? Who am I? But I think it should be a little more liberating to just get a license. And I think fiction writing is a license to go out in the world and, imagine a character in any setting that draws you in.
I think that's so true. I think that's one of the most fun parts about writing fiction is all of the just sometimes really random stuff you get to learn about and work into your stories, and all these, because you can't have your character always, all of them have the same profession, so you've got to learn about different things and settings and places. That's one of my favorite parts of writing is building that world and the character and how they interact. And yeah, you go on a lot of side trails researching random stuff at times, but I think that's a lot of fun, and it can be intimidating, but I've rarely had someone that I've asked for help on background information who was just like, no, I'm not interested in helping you. People are usually thrilled to talk about the thing that they do and love and enjoy. So it can build some interesting relationships too, which is also enjoyable.
Right. Yeah. Lifelong relationships, develop resources like Kelly and I now. I can feel like I can just pick up the, phone. I've actually called her a couple of times or zap her an email, and it's not even have to do any big introduction. She knows it's a question from me and she'll answer it.
That's awesome. What I also wanted to talk to you about is your character development, and all around, not just your main character, Flynn Martin, but I also enjoyed your antagonist. And that's one of those things that I think with antagonist, there's a special attention that is paid to really bring them to life. And not everybody does that, particularly in crime, where they're supposed to be the villain, the one you don't want to escape. You want them to get caught. You want them to have justice. But with a really good villain, you also find some connection. You have some level of maybe the teeniest bit of sympathy and understanding of yeah, I can see how they turned out this way. And I really enjoyed that with all of your characters, but particularly I have a fondness for well-developed, interesting villains.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that and wanted to ask you about your character development.
Sure. Well, I think in the case of the antagonist in No Lie Lasts Forever, Harry Kugel, that, I basically, because he's hiding in plain sight, he's a state bureaucrat. He works for a state agency. He's doing normal things like going out on dates, and he's doing normal things like listening to his classical music that he likes. And he's, of course, telling himself a story about who he is and what he's done in the past, but his for all intents and purposes on the exterior, he's quote unquote normal. And I think when you pick up a book and the bad guy is just all bad and completely just, a snarling, a mustache twirling kind of evil person, it's caricature. It's two-dimensional. It's almost boring in a way that there's no depth to him. So if you start your bad guys thinking about them as normal people, and then understand what the wrong part of them is, the broken part of them is, the flawed part of them is, and don't overemphasize that. Just let it sort of naturally come out in the course of the story, and not hit the reader over the head every few paragraphs with how bad they are. It's a little more surprising, a little more tense, a little more worrisome for the reader. The person in the room who, in a meeting, let's say, who's brooding and trying to be a real angry presence in the room might be drawing all the attention, but the scariest person might be the quiet one in the corner who's saying nothing and just not drawing attention to themselves. So that might be how you want to kind of think about drawing your characters on the page.
I like that. And especially that you mentioned the way they develop in tandem with the plot. And that's actually one of our topics this quarter, my high school English class, working with them on seeing those connections, and that, characters don't change unless they have to. If they're humans, we don't like change. We get forced into adapting and changing and trying to get them to like visualize and understand with the book that we're reading. As the character goes through each of these challenges, they have to develop a new skill, or they have to adjust or alter or do whatever. And the focus gets put so much in a lot of fiction, especially I think sometimes with genre fiction, where we tend to have a little bit more of that like formulaic strategy toward developing a story at times, that it's like, okay, the character needs to change here, here, and here, and we're going to have this, that, and the other happen in tandem. And it's kind of like, but if we don't like dig into it more than that and really have that deeper backstory and motivations and the whys behind all of it, it doesn't have that fullness that it could when that time is really put in to that development arc.
Right. I guess another way of saying that is just, they are people first. And if you can get your characters to feel like they're real people living on this earth and their feet are on the ground and they have all the other human basic needs and issues that they face during the day, no matter what that setting or situation might be, if you can get us to really relate to them and get the sense of their humanity, and then show us what they're going to do to get what they want, what sort of laws or things they will do to make sure that they're successful in their human goals, their human quest. Give us the person first before you give us the either good or the bad, I guess, because all your characters can't be bad and all your characters can't be good. And if the good ones are all Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, that's not going to work. And if the bad ones are all flame-throwing evil people that do nothing but, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a boring ride for your readers, and they'll probably close the book.
Well, it's kind of funny. My husband was listening to some podcast this morning. I don't even know what it was. And whoever was talking was trying to explain the difference she saw between literary fiction and commercial fiction. And I thought her definition was so weird, because she said that literary fiction is a focus on the characters and their lives and development, while commercial fiction is focused on the plot. And I was like, I don't think so.
Well, you better have a character in your thriller. And I have to say, there are some books that I can pick up, and within the first 15 or 20 pages, I can tell that the writer is more interested in all forward action and just very simple idea of painting a sketch of a person rather than giving me a whole person in my mind. And that is reader preference, too. And I think there are readers who enjoy the other kind of high concept, I would call it, approach. And that's fine. I just got back from Left Coast Crime in San Francisco over the weekend. And, there are hundreds of crime writers there, hundreds of crime fiction writers there. And they come in all stripes, and the readers do too, and what they care about. Everything I'm expressing today is just my personal taste, but even a quote-unquote commercial fiction novel, if it's in the airport paperback rack, I still want to get to know a person and do the normal things that a book I hope will do for me, which is show me how others live and show me how others are interpreting this crazy world we live in and are managing their way through it. And I'd like to see the ordinary people thrown into extraordinary circumstances. And in order for me to care, I need to see their whole world first.
I'm with you on that. I really need to connect with the character and find something that drives me to be interested and concerned about them. And I feel like that with your character Flynn in this series, she is not perfect. She has to make some judgment calls, and not every reader is going to be like, yeah, I'd do the same thing. But as you're getting to know her and what she's, weighing her options, and she's making decisions under a lot of stress a lot of the time. And you feel like you're in there with her, and you understand, like, yeah, even if I would have done something different in certain situations, like, I get it. She's not perfect. She's gonna maybe do something in the heat of the moment, or, not do something or whatever. But she feels real. She feels very human in that. And that brings in that opportunity to really connect with her and see her as a person that you care about
Yeah.
and you hope survives all of this.
Yeah. She's divorced. She's a single mom. She's under some pressure to maybe start dating from her coworker, Tamika. She's also under the shadow of her father, who was a newspaper print legend in the Denver area. And she's in television, which she sees as sort of thin and not as deep as what he used to do. And she's also a veteran. She's not a young spring chicken. She's been around the block a lot. She's been lied to by sources, and she's cynical, and she's developed her cynicism through her work, and she doesn't suffer fools. And so she's a little prickly, I guess I would say, and hopefully that comes through.
Yeah, you really brought her to life, and I really appreciated that. And we've talked a lot about your characters, but I don't want to run out of time before mentioning also that you have a great plot through both of the books, and keeps the reader going. What approach do you take as far as developing your mystery and the plot, and just kind of the stages that the characters go through to navigate it and figure things out? Do you have kind of something that you go to as far as any type of structure, or are you more of like an organic developer as you're writing?
I'm 1,000% organic developer. I have no idea how the people who plan ahead or plot or outline, I have no idea how they sit down and do that. To me, I get up in the morning and write, and I try to be entertained. I entertain myself, and if nobody ever reads the book, I'm at least entertained for a couple hours by what's going to be happening. And in order to be entertained, I need to be surprised. If I kind of knew where it was going, I think to me, it would feel like I'm doing a paint by numbers kind of thing. And I know that's the outliners will tell you, no, it's not that bad. You still surprise yourself. But I don't know how they outline, because it would take me 2 years to come up with the outline. I always just sort of started with a scene and watched how it bloomed from there. And one scene would lead to the next. Yeah, I think of every scene needs to have tension, or some sort of building tension, some sort of handoff to the next scene. It has to have, every scene should have a beginning, middle, and end. It shouldn't be a static thing, although there are probably some chapters that are a little more static than others. But, they can't just be cookie cutter, I guess. And they can't be, you've got to challenge yourself to make sure you're not repeating settings, at least as little as possible, and that you're keeping the reader on their toes. I always try to think about the reader, and try to think about, even if I'm sort of quote unquote in the scene emotionally myself and trying to picture the scene, trying to be respectful of the reader and how much patience they have, not repeating information over and over and things like that. I think we've all seen enough movies, we've read enough books, we've seen plays, we've even short stories have beginning, middle, and end, and we roughly know where we are. I would say it's sort of ingrained in us by the time we're probably 5 years old around what a story consists of. And I think if you trust yourself to know that sort of general arc and try to picture the adventure, the ride that you want to take your readers on, you'll come up with the elements that will make for an interesting journey.
I'm very similar to you in process, so I understand everything you're saying.
Okay, good. Good.
I like that you mentioned that focus on the reader and making sure like they're getting what they need out of it. I think we can get in our own heads a little too much sometimes, and I think that's a great reminder to consider what it's bringing for the reader and what they're getting out of it. And I just looked up at our time, and we have already just like sped through our half hour.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
before we start to wrap up, I did want to mention that you are going to be in the Farmington area on May 2nd. And I appreciate this a lot because you're coming to speak at a series that I host over at Quill and Quest Bookstore on the 2nd. And this will be after the new book comes out, and we'll be chatting with the bookstore so that they can hopefully have some copies there as well for that. But tell us a little bit about your topic that you're going to be sharing at the Right to Publish event in May.
Did I already give you a topic?
You said taking the long view of writing. So tell
There
us a
you
little
go.
bit more
Well,
about that.
yeah, I could talk all day about that. I think everybody I've met a lot of writers who invest so much in that first book. They really just have to get that book published. They're very, they're kind of in a rush. I think they might knock on the door of a few agents and get rejected, and maybe they get some advice, but they don't really take it to heart. Maybe they went to one conference or one writing community kind of gathering, and they thought that was enough, and then they kind of self-published or something, which is fine. I mean, absolutely nothing wrong. It's fantastic that self-publishing and independent publishing exists. I love it. There's nothing better than getting your story out in the world, but it's a long journey. It's something where you should, like anything else, if you were to cook an omelet for the first time, it probably wouldn't be as good as the 10th one you made. And that's just through practice. It's through experience. The number one thing you hear from every writing instructor out there is just keep writing. And what's incredible about it is you do get better. And if that first book is not quite lighting up, putting agents in a panic mode to sign you up, if that first book is falling flat with your beta readers, if the first book is just not gaining traction, maybe just put it aside and just come up with another story and apply what you learned to the next story and keep going from there. You will get better. And I would say you need to be doing all the things a professional writer would do, which is going to conferences, spending time learning, finding new people to network with, helping other up-and-coming writers, even though you're not published. You can help other writers. You can write reviews for them. You can meet them for coffee. You can read their manuscripts. You can give them your feedback. They can give you feedback. Just do all the things that a professional writer would do and reach out, build community, join communities. It's just an amazing thing because the more writing groups you work with and more writers you meet, the better your writing gets. It doesn't sound like it works, but it does. And I've heard many, many, many writers over the years say the same thing.
Awesome. Well, I am excited to hear you talk, and hopefully a lot of people in our community are too, because that is definitely something. I've been either independently or traditionally published for 15 years, and I work with a lot of other writers and aspiring writers, and one of the things that I see most often is just rushing and putting something out there or querying too soon when it's just not really a finished project yet.
Yeah.
And it can really, like when you're thinking about it as a business, it can really set things back significantly if you kind of jump the gun at times and put something out there that creates a reputation that isn't what you wanted. I'm thrilled with this topic. I am excited to hear more about it. So thank you for being willing to do that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, as we start to wrap up, I did want to remind our listeners the first book in Mark's series is No Lie Lasts Forever, and that is out now. And this should be airing right around the time the book's releasing, but we'll be excited for Two Truths and a Lie as well. Mark, can you remind us of the release date for book 2 and where people can find you and the books online?
April 7th is the release date for book 2. Book 3 is in the works and should be out in April or May, I think, of 2027. And I'm at writermarkstevens.com. If you're on Instagram, it's Mark54Stevens, and the Twitter or X handle is Writer Stevens, and TikTok is Mark54Stevens, and there's also a Facebook page, Writer Mark Stevens.
I will put a link to your website in the show notes. Thank you so much. This has been great talking to you, and I am excited to see you in May and then read more in the series next year.
Awesome. Thanks for all the great questions. Great conversation.